بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله تعالى وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. فقد نوينا التعلم وتعليم وتذكر وتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة نبيه والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير وكل ما نواه مشايخنا ابتغاء وجه الله وثوابه وقربه. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا يا كريم. Alhamdulillah, in our introduction to Arabic morphology classes, we've talked last week about some introductory issues relating to the verb, the word structure itself, and obviously sarf being specifically directed toward verbs and secondarily directed toward those words which are derived from the verb. Right, so we listed a few of the types of words, and we mentioned that the idea of the sarf, sarafa, meaning to change, that you take a word from its original root, and by doing some changes on it and amending it in certain ways according to certain patterns, then you come out with other variant words, right, with specific unique meanings to that pattern from the original word. Okay, so we listed them, right? You have the active participle, the ism fa'il. You have the passive participle, ism maf'ul. You have the word that denotes the place the action took place in. You have the word that denotes the instrument by which the action took place, right, and so forth. The time, the place, and there's many. Then you have the superlative, where you're comparing, like greater or taller or wider, and all of those are just variants of the original 3-letter or 4-letter roots. Then we talked about words with respect to the amount of root letters they have. Right, so you have words that are only 3 letters, right, and those are the most common. Then you have words that are originally 3 letters, but additional letters were added. Right, so those are going to be the remaining forms. Right, so form 1 we'll be talking about today is the default. Right, it's three letters if you're talking about the triliteral root, and 4 letters if you're talking about the quadrilateral root. So that's with regards to how many letters are in the word. Then we discussed with regards to what type of letters are in the word. Right, so letters that are like the alif, waw, and ya are considered the 6 letters. So a word that has 6 letters in it is called mu'tal. Right? And it's not, we don't want anyone to get caught up on the definitions at the moment. Each of those will be coming in their own chapters in the beginning, in the later parts of the class. So you have the mu'tal is a word that has a 6 letter in it. You have the mahmuz is a word that has a hamza in it. And then you have the muda'af, which is a word that has a repeated letter in it. Right? And then each of those branches out. Right? So if the 6 letters in the fa is in the fa column, right? Because we broke it down that the 3 root letters are similar to the idea of a template, that the fa adjoins with the first letter, the ayn with the second letter, the lam with the last letter. Right, and we're going to revisit that structure today. Right, so we've done a lot of these corollary introductory issues to kind of map out the process, to map out the science itself. And just to reiterate that the science of sarf directly correlates to the science of qira'ah, right, the recitation of the Qur'an. Likewise, it also has direct implications and you can say an effect on the rasm al-khat of the Qur'an, the actual way the Qur'an was written, because right? And that's a very deep science. Like why is the ta small, a large ta here instead of a small ta? And most of those issues come back to sarf, right? So it's a really beautiful science because it helps you understand a lot of the Qur'an that you would not necessarily understand through just grammar. Tamam. So in today's lesson, we're going to focus on the words that have a three-letter root, right, and with no additional letters. And we want to focus on some kind of corollary aspects related to the verbs, using form 1 as our example for today. But all these aspects that we're talking about today can be applied to later forms as well. For those who have already taken some bit of the morphology with us, right, you'll know that we're going to focus on 10 forms that are the most important forms. There are essentially 14 or 15, the last 5 being very rare, so we're not going to focus too much on them. We will try to mention them in the class, so that will be something additional for even those who've already taken some bit of sarf. Right, so today we're going to talk about 4 major aspects, right? And these 4 aspects combined with the practical knowledge of the sarf, right? And I believe we've given out to the charts. No? So inshallah we will try to get the charts for you all. We have all 10 forms written out, past tense and present tense. And with examples and everything. Hopefully we'll get that to you soon. But these 4 aspects, right, passive, active, affirmative, and negative, applied with the practical knowledge, right, if you take those 2 together, right, and you build your vocabulary, you will be able to speak right away. Right? And it would the reason why you won't be able to speak more than you want to would be either a lack of vocabulary or just a very nuanced understanding of a few things that are yet to come. As for understanding and reading Arabic, then that's going to greatly depend on how much of the grammar lessons you've retained and you can apply along with your sarf. Tamam. And if we get time, we're going to talk about the past tense with regards to the 6 letters. Right, so first things first, we're focusing on form 1 today, and we're going to talk about past tense, how form 1 looks in the past tense, and then how form 1 looks in the present tense, inshallah. Right, so this is the basic triliteral verbs. They don't have any additional letters. Right, so these are the default words. Right, so you have 3 root letters, the fa, right, as your general, right, template, right, ayn, and then lam. Right, so that makes up an example of a 3-letter verb. Right, so you can see here that there's no additional letter whatsoever. Right, as opposed to the upcoming forms, like form 2, for instance, where there's a tashdid on the middle letter. So that's a 4th letter. Right, it's a fa and then 2 ayn and then the lam. Right, so but we're focusing just on the 3. Okay, and then whatever word that you want, you take the root letters of that word, right, and then you apply it to this formula. Right, so for instance, if I were to, does anyone know how to say library in Arabic? A library? Anyone? See these types of words you can actually guess. Right? Right, so what does a library contain? You have to unmute yourself.
Books.
Books. Okay, how do you say book in Arabic?
Kitab.
Kitab. Okay, what are the 3 most important letters in that word? Out of the
Taba.
kaf, ta, ba. Good. Right, so kitab Now this is where knowledge of sarf and the verbs and the derivatives, right? They turn your vocabulary into a very large vocabulary. So kitab, right? Most people know that word, right? ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, right? In the beginning of the Qur'an, right? So if you know kitab, right, and if you want to say, right, I wrote, or he wrote, or she wrote, or they wrote, right, then you just take, okay, what are the three most important letters here? Right, kaf, ta, and ba, obviously, being what we call sahih letters, sound letters. Right, the sick letters are usually last in consideration. Right, and then you just apply. Right, kaf, right, ta, right, and ba. So kataba means he wrote. Right, but furthermore, if we take all of the corollary words that we talked about, the variant words, right, like for instance the ism fa'il, the active participle, right, if you apply the same structure to these three letters, you have katib, which means writer. Right, if you apply it to the passive participle, right, then you have, right, see how I'm replacing the fa, the ayn, and the lam only. Fa, ayn, lam, with these three letters. So these three letters correspond to the three most important letters. Right, so whatever variant I'm using, I'm replacing those three letters with with the new three letters. Right, so maktub is something that's written. Katib is someone who wrote. Right, one of the variant words that we took was maf'al. Maf'alun. Right, so how do I apply kitab to maf'al? How do I apply kitab to maf'al? I'm only replacing the three most important letters with my new three letters. Maktabun. Good. Maktabun. Right, and if you wanted to look up, for instance, you wanted to look up maktab in the dictionary, you would eliminate all letters except for the three root letters, look that up, and then search for the nouns that follow the verbs. The first thing that comes is a section of verbs, and then comes the nouns. There's two words actually. Maktab is a desk. Maktabah with a ta is a library. Right, but you can see how they are directly correlated. A desk is where you write a kitab. Right, kitab being anything that's written. Tamam. Now, once you have this structure, right, kataba, right, and you can apply it wherever you wish as long as you know the variants. Right, so part of the purpose of this class is to learn all the variants. Right, then you can do as you wish. You have all the tools to plug in whatever words you want. So if you came up with a new word, for instance, you know how to say to cook. How do you say to cook? Anyone? In Arabic? Or to eat? Akala is to eat. Okay. How do you say? Right. How do you say the person who eats? Right. So that would be the active participle, which follows the pattern of fa'il. For form 1. For form 1. Okay. So if our letters are akala, right, so we can see that this is mahmuz. It has a hamza in it. Right, nothing specific is going to change regarding that. So akala. Akilun. Good. Right. Akilun. Right, and then later we'll show you if you want to make it feminine, akilatun, and so forth. Right. So the way that they would write this is this. Right, instead of putting the hamza and then another alif, they would just make a mad. And that's a sarf rule as well that we'll take in the later days. Right. So you can either use the three letters that you know and apply it to a verb. So with the verb, you're going to have four things. Well, three things. I always get these numbers messed up. So with the verb, you're going to have three things. You're going to have a tense, right? So this is going to be past tense. The forms that we're talking about now, fa'ala, right? Being three letters. Right? Fa'ala means he did. If you replace it with akala, means he ate. Right? So you have a tense, past, right? Automatically, once you do this, you'll have a doer. Right? Who is the doer of the word? He ate. So he is subsumed in this word, which will come later. So you have so first is an action, which is eating. The second is a tense, which is past. Right? And third you'll have is a doer, which is hidden in this word, which is he. Right? Or if you wished, you can change it to a person's name by adding that name afterwards and making it marfu', right? Because the fa'il is always marfu'. So every verb has those three things at least. Okay? Same thing would apply to the present tense. You would have a tense, it would just be different than the past. You would have the action itself, and then you have the doer. So any word that you know and you want to say he did it, right, or she did it, or they did it, you would apply it to this form, right, and then take the scale down. We will share that, inshallah. I don't know if we can share it now, can we? I'm not sure. We'll see if we can share it now. However, there are certain things that you can do, right, to change akala to a nuanced, different meaning. Right, so you can either amend the pattern. Right, so here we're talking about fa'ala. Right, fa'ala, right, is the active past tense. Is the active past tense. You can turn it into a passive past tense by making it fu'ila. Right, so ukila means it was eaten. Right, so you can augment it that way, or you can change it by adding prefixes. So if you add something here, you can change it from being a positive sentence, he ate, which is positive, right? So the lack of any prefix is going to be affirmative. That's the default, is affirmative. If you put a negative, like ma, right? Ma akala, he did not eat. Right? So you can change it that way as well, and that applies to the past or the present. So any questions on this before we move to the important parts? Not that that wasn't important. So, okay, so I'm going to write this slightly smaller because we have two things. Right, past tense. So we have your fa, we have our ayn, we have the lam. Okay, this is our structure for past tense. Okay? Our structure for present tense we'll put down here. So the first thing we want to talk about is the difference between the active tense and the passive tense. Right, active in Arabic is known as ma'ruf. And for some of you, this is a review. Right? Ma'ruf comes from what words? What are the three most important letters here? Right? Because obviously this is a variant, and this is a derivative word that came from a verb. It's one of the types of variants. Ma'ruf. Ayn, ra, and fa. Good. So if we plug that into here, right, we have a, ra, fa. Right. Arafa means he knew. He knew. Right. Arafa means he knew. Ma'ruf means something known. Something known. Right. So an active verb is a verb in which the doer of the verb is known. The doer of the verb is known. So here you would say, right, fi'l means verb, fi'lun ma'ruf, right, active verb. Active verb. Right? If you want to be very specific, you can say, right, al-fi'l, right, the verb, al-madi, which is past tense, al-ma'ruf. Right, the active past tense verb. The active past tense verb. Right, so that's what we're talking about here, and that's the default. Right, any word that is on the form of fa'ala, and the most important letter is that the first letter has a fatha. If the first letter has a fatha, then it's active. Right? And generally, the last letter will have also. The middle letter, right, is not as important. Right? There are some words where the middle letter is a kasra, like sami'a, which means to hear. Okay, so sami'a, I'm trying to write it right, as it would be connected. Sami'a. Right, how do I say something that is heard? Something that is heard. That's something that was heard, right? That you're right. You're right in one way, but I mean a noun that means something that was heard. Masmu'. Right. So here again, we're using that variant, right? And this is why these variants are so important. Right? That if you know the variant, then you can plug in any word that you want. You can plug in any word that you want. Right? And any words that you know, you can just plug them in and you have an extra word. Tamam. So, all right, so ma'ruf means something known. In this case specifically it means the doer of the action is known. Doer is known. Right? So when I put something on this form, fa'ala or fa'ila, or if the fatha is on the front word, and that's your sign that it's ma'ruf. Right? Then when I translate, sami'a means he heard. Right? So the doer is who in that sentence? Who is the doer of he heard? He. Right? So the doer is known. Right? As opposed to sumi'a, which was mentioned just now, it was heard. Right? Who is the doer of it was heard? Like, who's the one who heard it? Right? Something was heard. Like, for instance, if I said, right, something was heard in the parking lot last night. Right? Who is the one who heard it? Unknown. Good. Okay. So if we say, if I tell you that the word for unknown is majhul, right, immediately you should be able to tell me, how do you say he did not know? How do you say he did not know? A past tense verb. He did not know. Or you could... Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, ma arafas, right? You're using the word ma'ruf with a negative. But if you're just using an affirmative sentence, right, using jahal, right, majhul, which means unknown, right, you could say either ma arafa or you could just use jahal. Right? But how would you use jahal here? Unknown. So something that's unknown has the meaning inside it of not knowing. But you have to plug it in. How do I say he did not know? Or he was ignorant of something? You're right on point. You just want to use this word instead. Jahala. Right? So jahala by itself means he did not know. Right? He did not know. It's the same meaning as ma arafa. right? He did not know, right? You can translate jahal as he is ignorant. He was ignorant of something, right? But you can see that if you know unknown, you know how to say he doesn't know. Okay, so, right. So how do you say a person who has no knowledge, or a person who's ignorant? Right? Again, the active participle, right, is on the pattern of fa'il for form 1. For form 1, you use this pattern to use an active participle. These are passive participles. Maf'ul. Sorry, say it again. Jahilun. Jahilun. Good. Right. How do you say the person who knows? Using the other word on the board. Arifun. Right. There is a slight difference between the word arafa and the word alima. So another way you can say a person who knows is alim. Right. Again, it's the same pattern. Arif and alim are similar words, but arif is used for things that you don't know everything about that thing. Right. So you don't say alim billah. Right. He's a knower of Allah. You don't use alim. Right. Use arif, because anyone who knows has intimate knowledge with Allah, right? Their knowledge is automatically going to be deficient. So no one completely encompasses Allah in knowledge. So use arif instead of alim. So, right. So here we have our first two types. We have our passive, or sorry, our active. Right, this is what we call the active. Right, or you can refer to it as the doer is known. Best to refer to it as ma'ruf. We're learning the terms as we go. Passive would be majhul. Right, so okay, but we're missing one part. Right. In order to make, right, so the pattern to make for the verb to be active is as above, right? Fa, right? But the first letter has a fatha. Fa'ala. It's either fa'ala or fa'ila or fa'ula. So that's why the middle letter doesn't matter. It changes according to the word. But passive is a slightly different pattern that you use. That if you want to change your word from active to passive, then you change it from fa'ala to fu'ila. Okay? The most important two letters being that the first letter is a dhamma and the second to last letter is a kasra. And the reason why I say the second to last letter instead of the middle letter is because when you add, you have the additional letters, the same principles apply. Like if I were to use, for instance, form 4, which is af'ala, you have the additional hamza. Right? If I wanted to make it passive, I would put the first letter as a dhamma, second to last letter as a kasra. Right? That rule applies all throughout. So this is passive. Right? The active would be af'ala. Right? Sorry. Af'ala. Okay, so let's practice. I want to say, now we're going to switch between nouns and verbs because you can use these patterns, right? Right. So these are the verb versions of these two. The noun versions, which have similar meaning, are these. Can everyone see this? Is this too low? Okay. Can everyone see that? Right. So the difference between a verb and a noun is very important. Right? Even though when you translate things get muddled up, a verb has what we mentioned before, the three things. Right? You have a meaning of action within the word. Right? So like for instance, we just use alim, right, or arif, right, the person who knows. there's a meaning of action there. There's the word of the action of knowing, right? But a verb has a meaning of action, and it has a tense along with it, right? So he knew, that's a past tense. Or he knows, that's a present tense. Whereas a noun, right, it has the meaning of action, right, but doesn't have any tense. Likewise, right, so verb, you have three things. You have the action word, right? You have the tense, and you have either a doer or a substitute doer, right? So here the doer is known, here the doer is unknown, but doesn't mean that there's no doer, right? It's just not mentioned. Right? I should clarify that. A doer is unknown. So I say, it was written. It was written. Right? So that it is still there. Right? That's the substitute doer. But the noun has the action word. It has the doer. It has the person. Right? When you say, for instance, alim, you say a person who knows. Right? In this case, it's a masculine word. If you say alimatun, then it's she is a person who knows, meaning a woman who knows. So there's an action, there's a person, but there's no tense. Right? So the person who knows, there's no tense in that word. Right? It's not the person who knows yesterday. That's not found in nouns. Okay, so let's try it out for a second. Right? And likewise this, but it's a passive meaning, right? The person who is known. Right, or the thing that is known. So if I want to say, and be careful about the words that I use, he was grateful. He was grateful. Right, do we know the root letters? Anyone know the root word for gratitude in Arabic? Shukr, right? So you say shukran. Shukran is, right? So you have sheen, right? We can put it here. Right. Sheen, kaf, and ra. So how do you say he was grateful? Now first, is that a verb or a noun? He was grateful. Verb or noun? Verb. Okay. He was grateful. Is the doer known or unknown? Known. Okay, so how do I say the verb? Shakara. Good. Okay. Something, right? A thing appreciated. Something that is appreciated. Is that a verb or a noun? It's a noun. Good. Right. So something, that's a kind of a giveaway. Okay. Is it active or passive?
Passive.
Passive. Good, because it's not doing the gratitude, it's the object of the gratitude. Okay, so how would you say it in Arabic?
Mashkur.
Mashkur. One of the ways to say thank you in Arabic is mashkur. Right? Meaning anta mashkur. Right? You are appreciated. And it's actually a Quranic verse, وَكَانَ سَعْيُكُمْ مَشْكُورًا, and your efforts are appreciated. Appreciated. Mashkuran. Okay. One more. Let's see. Let's use some religious terminology. Okay. What does this word mean? Disbelief. It also has the opposite meaning of shukr. So how would you translate that?
Ungrateful.
Great, right? Ungrateful. Right, so, and you'll see, that's why in the Qur'an, there's a lot of different ways you can translate something. Right? Because one word has many meanings, and one meaning fits the context better than others. And actually, one of the words for a farmer is the Right? That is the kuffar, are farmers. Right? And that's one verse that's constantly mistranslated. Because we know the word kuffar usually means what? What does kuffar mean? Yeah, it means, right? It means kafir, active, but it's a different variant which means more emphasis. Right? So kuffar is the plural of kafir. Right? Just like tulab is the plural of talib. Right? But kuffar in one of the verses means farmers, because the farmer is the one who covers the seed, and that's the idea of ingratitude and disbelief. Right? So let's just use disbelief, right, for our example. Right? So to disbelieve, right? And the essence of disbelief is ingratitude. So there's no contradiction between the meanings. To disbelieve. Okay. Something that is disbelieved. Unfortunately, in English, you can't have a sentence without any tense. Right? So usually if you're translating nouns and you're forced to use verb language or tense language, you use now, you use present, is. Right? So the person who knows, for instance, or the thing that is shown gratitude. Right? You can't escape using a verb in English. But there's no tense whatsoever in Arabic. So kufr means to disbelieve. How do I say? He disbelieved. He disbelieved. Kafara. Right? He disbelieved. Kafara. Good. All right. Something that is disbelieved in, or something that's not believed in. Makfurun. Good. A person who, or you can just say disbeliever. How do you say disbeliever? Good. How do you say it was rejected? It was, meaning it was disbelieved. So answer, and go back to the basic questions. Verb or noun? It was disbelieved. Say it again. No, that would be ka. Right? Any ka would be active. If the first letter has a fatha, it's active automatically. Right? So that would mean he disbelieved. It was disbelieved in. Right? However, the better word would be it was rejected. You can say that as well. Kufira. Good. Kufira. Right? So it's the verb. So you can see here there's a correlation. Right? The active verb, if you change it to a noun, it becomes fa'il. Right? Active participle, it's called. The verb, the noun version of fu'ila, the passive verb, is the passive participle. Essentially, they have the exact same meaning, except that one has no tense and the other one does. Same meaning. You can say mashkur or shukira. Right? Anta mashkur or shukirta. Both of them are the same. So that's one consideration with regards to the verbs, and this is not specific to Form 1. However, the patterns here, right, fa'ilun and maf'ulun, are specific to Form 1. Right? If you want to make an active participle of Form 2, there's a slightly different, there's a different word that you would use, which we'll take in piece by piece. Right, so the active tense, right? Let's just read it, right? It's a default tense, as you can see here on the slide. That the active tense. So for those of you who are registered, I think you have access to the slides. Is that right? Yeah, so I mean, the scale itself is here. And I believe we've given it in the grammar class as well. It's also on the forms that we're going to be sending you, the whole list of all the 10 forms. Right, so you have the whole scale. So fa'ala, fa'ala, fa'alu, fa'alat, and that's where you can change the pronoun from being he to she or they. Right, so if you want to say they disbelieved, you would say kafaru, right, which is actually a word that's in the Qur'an constantly. Right, inna alladhina kafaru min ahli kitab wal mushrikeen. Right, so the ma'ruf is the default. Right, it indicates that the doer is known. And that doer is either going to be presented as a word, right? So I can say fa'ala Zaydun, Zayd did, or Zayd disbelieved, or Zayd is a disbeliever, or right? Poor Zayd. Hopefully Allah guides him, right? Or, right? The doer is unknown, right? And then that's or you can be a pronoun. He disbelieved, they disbelieved, with no names. Passive tense is nothing really different, except that it takes a change from the original pattern, the fa'ala. You would put the dhamma on the first letter and the kasra on the second to last letter to form, in combination with whatever root letters you want, to form a passive. Right? So it's going to have the same meaning, the same action, same tense, but the doer is going to be unmentioned or unknown. That's called majhul. So it indicates to the presence of an action, right, done by an unknown doer. Right, the substitute doer is used. Right, so if I said one great verse to use as an example for this is the word where the word dhikr is used. What does dhikr mean? Does anyone know? Dhikrun or zikr in Urdu? Remembrance. Good. Right. So to remember. Right. So in the Qur'an it says, and I'll write the whole verse. I'll just take out this part. I can rewrite that. The first particle, I'll tell you what it means. Idha means when, or whenever. إذا ذكر الله وحده, meaning كفرتم. Okay. Let's give it a shot. Does anyone know what this means already? Wahdahu means alone. And idha means whenever. And then you have a word, dhukira. What kind of word is dhukira?
Passive.
It's passive, but is it passive a noun or is it a passive verb?
A verb.
Good. Passive verb. Good. Dhukira fu'ila. First letter is a dhamma, second to last letter is kasra. Dhukira. Right, so the doer is not mentioned, right? But here you have a substitute doer, which we understood from the rules of grammar, that this word, right, it kind of translates like the object, and it's stepping in the place of the unknown doer, right? So how would you translate this? إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ.
Whenever Allah is remembered.
Good. Whenever Allah is remembered, right? So who is doing the remembrance? It's unknown, right? So, and usually sentences are used with the passive if they're general, right? So so that's why we have the translation: whenever Allah is remembered, regardless by who, right? Right? Wahdahu, whenever Allah is remembered or mentioned. That's another meaning of dhikr, right? Alone, kafartum, right? What happens? Kafartum. What does kafara mean again? right? But specifically the verb version, kafara,
He disbelieved.
he disbelieved, right? So here it's kafartum, right, which has the pronoun entum, you all. So how would you translate it? Kafartum. So you all, what?
Disbelieved.
Disbelieved, right? Past tense. Good, good. Right, so whenever Allah is remembered or mentioned alone, you all disbelieve. Right, and this is addressed to the hypocrites. Right, وَإِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَإِذَا ذُكِرَ الَّذِينَ مِن دُونِهِ إِذَا أَنْتُمْ تَسْتَبْشِرُونَ I believe, or كما قال, right, or Allah is telling them that they're bothered by the mentioning of Allah alone, right, with tawheed. Right, so here we have a passive and an active in the same sentence. Right. So, and then here the passive is mentioned with a parent word, not just the pronoun. So it's not that whenever he is remembered. Right, the he is replaced by the actual name. Right, lafz al-jalala, the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So right, and then here kafartum is a pronoun. You all disbelieved, as opposed to saying the names of the people. And then lastly, the substitute doer is the one to whom the action happened. However, no doer is mentioned. Right, so dhukir Allahu, Allah is the one being remembered. Right, whoever is remembering him is not mentioned. So, any questions on that? Right, so you can see on the slide the whole scale. فَعَلَ فَعَلَ فَعَلُوا فَعَلَتْ فَعَلَتَا فَعَلْنَا فَعَلْتَ فَعَلْتُمَا فَعَلْتُمْ فَعَلْتُمْ. Right, that means you all did. But if you plug in kafara, it's you all disbelieved. Right? I mean, that's what the verse says. So that's right, that consideration is in regards to the doer. Either it's known or unknown. We brought this part just for the benefits. This will come later as well, right? Because these are the what they're called mushtaqat, the derivative words, or the variants of the original verb. So we changed the verb to this form. We made a variant word with the similar meaning. All right. So we have an active verb or a passive verb. The active is the default, right? Starting with a fatha. And then the passive is changed to a different form, right? And then the meanings are there. And these are the proper names of those. Right? So this is a verb ma'ruf. Fi'al ma'ruf, fi'al majhul. The second is a positive sentence and a negative sentence, just like in English. Right? Zayd went to the store. Zayd did not go to the store. One's positive, one's negative. Okay, so the positive sentence is the default. Right? If you don't mention anything and you just say fa'ala, for instance, sorry, I erased that. If you just say fa'ala, right, that means he did. That's an affirmative. Okay. In order to make it negative, you have to add, right, a particle, or you have to add a prefix to negate. Same thing in English. You would say that I don't want. Instead of I want, I don't want. You have to add a prefix. Tamam. Right, so we're not talking about nouns at the moment, so we can leave this. We'll leave that for the moment. Right, so a positive sentence is called muthbit. Okay, and this is good practice, so we'll ask you, what are the 3 root letters of muthbit? What are the 3 root letters of muthbit? Right, remove the additional letters, and you have your 3 letters. I think thabata. Good. So if we put that on our verb scale, right? Thabata. Right? Thabata means to affirm. Right? It also means to make something firm. Right? So you have the word thabit, right? Or thabat, right? To affirm, right? Or to make something firm. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, he would make dua, ثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَنَا, right? And it's I believe it's in the Qur'an as well, right? Make our feet firm. Tamam. So muthbit is an affirmation. Okay. So that's an affirmative word. That's the default. You don't have to do anything to make it affirmative. It's already, unless you change it. And the negative is manfi. Manfiyun. Right, now, what are the root letters? Sorry, there's no touch. What are the root letters here of manfi? Nun, fa, ya. Good. Right, and this is why it's important to know about the sikh letters, right? Because when you're dealing with sikh letters, you wouldn't say nafaya, nafaya. The Arabs, right? They don't like sikh letters being used in weird ways, right? So they would use this instead of saying nafaya, they would say nafa, nafa, right? Right, and that's a rule that any word, right, any past tense verb that ends in a sikh letter, that sikh letter is either going to be changed to an alif maqsura, right? So you have the kari zabar, the standing alif, right? Or it's going to be changed to a full alif like this. Right? They don't leave that sikh letter there. How do you know when to put what? Right? The kari zabar replaces the ya. The alif replaces the waw. It's pretty straightforward. Like for instance, the word for he called someone is da'wa, da'awa, da'awa. But they don't, right? Again, you have a sikh letter on the last letter. They change it because it's a waw. They change it to an alif. Da'a. Da'a means he called. Right? It was da'awa, like fa'ala. That's going to come later. Those are called the ta'lilat, how the sikh letters change. So the affirmative word is muthbit. You don't add anything. The negative word, you have to add a prefix. Okay? So these are the four important considerations for today. In order to make a word manfi, you have to add a prefix, and the prefixes are according to the tense. Right, so let's, for instance, give us an example of one of the verbs that we used earlier. Anyone? Just shout it out. Anyone? This is my trick to test your vocabulary. Arafa. Okay. What does arafa mean?
To know.
I thought it was a big mountain outside of Mecca. That's not the same thing? Actually, that arafa is this. Arafa. It's the same root letters because arafa, right, there's a reason why it's called that, and it does have to do with knowledge. Right? So arafa means what? He knew. Good. So he knew. If I want to say he did not know, how do I say it? Is that, if I said he did not know, would that be muthbit or manfi? Manfi. Good. All right, so in order for me to make arafa manfi, I have to add a prefix. All right, so let's list out the prefixes. So let's put arafa here in the middle. Okay. For past tense, you can use either ma, which is the base. That's the normal. Right, that's the norm. Ma arafa, he didn't know. He didn't know. Right. Ma arafa. right? You would say in Arabic, you would say if you want to say I don't know or I didn't know, you would say ma araftu, right? Ma araftu. As they say, لولا النبي ما عرفت ربي. If it wasn't for the Prophet, I would not have known my Lord. ما عرفت, I didn't know. Rabbi, my Lord. Right, so you can use ma, and that's the norm. But you can also use la in past tense, but it's very rare. Okay. La arafa. However, if you're going to use la in past tense, there's a condition. The Arabs generally wouldn't do it. However, they would do it in one circumstance, and that is if you're negating two separate verbs. Right, so we see this in the Qur'an, right? Two separate past tense verbs being negated, and the la is used. La saddaqa wala. Who can finish the verse? Wala salla. Good. Right. La saddaqa wa la salla, he didn't give charity nor did he pray. Right, so here you're negating two separate past tense verbs. Right, these are form 2, so that's the 3 root letters plus 1. Right, the middle letter is doubled. Right, so you're negating two separate verbs, then you use la. Otherwise, you would only use ma to negate a past tense. Right. Otherwise, you would only use ma to negate a past tense. Okay. Right, so, right, ma arafa, he didn't know. When it comes to present tense, and we'll be looking at present tense later on, right? Present tense, instead of fa'ala as your scale, as your norm, as your pattern, right? You're going to use ya'rifu. Right, so here we still have our 3 root letters. And this additional letter here, this ya, indicates to the pronoun inside. Right, so the ya indicates to the masculine, the ta indicates to the feminine, right, or the second person. And then the noon indicates to plural. Right, and we'll talk about that when we get to the scale, inshallah. Right, so let me just put this with fa'ala. So yaf'alu. Yaf'alu. Okay. How do I say? Right. So how do I translate yaf'alu if it's present tense? What does fa'ala mean?
He is doing.
He is doing. Good. We'll talk about later that it also has one of 2 meanings, either present or future. That's why it's called the imperfect tense, because it could be one or the other according to how you want it to mean. Right, so he is doing or he will do. So if I wanted to put here, he is listening, how do I say it? Or he is hearing, for instance.
Yasma'u.
Yasma'u, good. How do I say he is disbelieving? Good, right? You'll see that this middle letter can change slightly, just like this middle letter can. So we'll do that later. But yakfuru, right? He is disbelieving. How about he is showing gratitude? Yashkuru. How about he is ignorant? What was the word that we used? It's the word that we use for unknown.
Yajhalu.
Yajhalu. Good. Right. How do I say he knew? Sorry? Ya'rifu would be he knows. Right? I kind of tried to trick you. Right? He knew would be arafa, but he knows is ya'rifu. Good. Right? And you'll see ya'rifu is a kasra. All of that we'll be explaining, inshallah. Just form 1 is only a bit weird. The middle letters change sometimes. So sami'a, yasma'u, right? Kafara, yakfuru with a dhamma. Just now we did arafa, like normal. Ya'rifu with a kasra. The middle letter doesn't have as much importance. It doesn't change anything. Tamam. So the negative for the present tense would be by adding the prefix of either ma, which is less common, or la, which is the most common. So I should put that first, probably. Right, so la is the most common. Right, la ya'rifu, la yakfuru, la yashkuru. Right, well, right, la yajhalu, right, la yanfi, la yathbut. Right, all of the words that we're using, we can use it like that. La yaf'alu, he doesn't do. Tamam. Okay, but now this la, and this comes up later, just to give you a heads up. According to the context, you can use la in two different ways, really. Right, you can use a la to negate, or you can use a la to prohibit. Right, right. So you can say la, like for instance, la taf'alu, you are not doing. Right, ta being the second person. Right, taf'alu. Right. La taf'alu, you don't know. You can, or sorry, la ta'rifu, you don't know. La taf'alu, you aren't doing. But it could also be a prohibition. But if it's a prohibition, you'll see a sukun on the end. La taf'al, don't do it. Don't do it. Right, so that we'll talk about later. So it's a bit more versatile than the ma. But if the last letter is not sukun, then it means just the regular negation. Right? Just the regular manfi. Okay. So with all that being said, let's try something. Okay. So we did right, positive, negative. That's probably a better way to write it. Positive. Positive, negative, active, and passive. Right? And we talked about past tense, which is al-madi. And then the imperfect tense, or if you want to call it the present tense, al-mudari'. Okay, and if you'll notice that madi, I'll give you bonus points for whoever can tell me what are the 3 root letters of madi, and how do you say it in a past tense verb?
Mada.
Wow, good. That's correct. Mada. Right. So what are the root letters? Mim, dad, and ya. Right? So why is it that we don't say madaya? Madaya, like fa'ala. Because the Arabs what?
I think I interrupted somebody, sorry. Because Arabs don't like extending saying the weak letter at the end.
Good, exactly.
Instead of mabi.
And good, exactly. So if it's a ya, it becomes the alif maqsura, mada. Mada means he passed. Right? He went past. Right? So you can see that there's always a link between the meanings of the words. So they call it madi because it's something that went past. And this is actually the form of fa'il. Right? Madi, right? Fa'il, the one who goes past, the one who passed something. Okay? So that's good that you got that. So these are the things. Now, as you can see, that obviously each word is going to have something of each of these 3 columns. Right? Every word is going to either be positive or negative. Sorry, every word is going to be either active or passive, and every word is going to either be present tense or past tense. Right? We're excluding the command and the prohibition at the moment. Right? So let's put past and present. Okay, so I'm going to write a word, and I want everyone to, you can just call out if you wish, to comment on whether first it's past or present, second, whether it's known, the doer, if it's active or passive, right? And third is whether it's positive or negative. I believe this is spelled wrong. Apologies. Okay, so let's start with. Now, you don't need to know what it means to be able to do this. Okay. يفقه. Past or present?
Present.
Present, right? Okay, because it's not fa'ala. Exactly. Right. يفقه, present. Active or passive?
Active.
Active, good.
Active.
Which reminds me, I didn't show you the passive of the present tense, so remind me that in a second. Is it positive or negative? Positive, right? So you can go along. You can continue by calling these things their English equivalents, but really the goal would be to learn it in the terminological sense. So what you would say is this is al-fi'l, it's a verb, al-madi, which is past, al-ma'ruf, al-muthbit. Right? So, or you can do it the fast way, fi'l, madi, ma'ruf, muthbit. Right? Madi, ma'ruf, muthbit. Right, sorry, this is mudari'. Al-mudari' ma'ruf, muthbit. Does that make sense? Right, so if you look on the chart, on the slides, right, we have all of the four combinations, right? So every word can be either active or passive, right? Right, so active, positive, passive, positive, active, negative, or positive, negative, and then you could even double that by saying past or present. We're doing past it once and then present second. Tamam. So all the slides have just been in past tense. We did skip ahead a little bit. Before we go into the present tense completely, and we'll just quickly go through the slides, I just want to add, there's two more prefixes that you could add to make a word negative. Right, so we already put the ma, which is specific to the maldi, sometimes used in the mudari'. Right, then we have the la. What is la generally used for? Past or present? Maldi or mudari'? Mudari', and it can be used in the past tense if you're negating two separate verbs. Right? La saddaqa wa la salla. He didn't pay charity, nor did he pray. Otherwise, you wouldn't use it. You can use len. Right? Len means never. Right? So if I said len ya'rifa, right? How would you translate len ya'rifa? Len ya'rifa.
He never knew.
Is that past tense or present tense? Your translation, past or present? He never knew. Sorry?
He never knows.
Yeah, so the mudari' can be future or present. So now try it. Because you can't say never and present, right? Unless you live in Neverland with Peter Pan.
Never know.
He will never know, right? He will never know. Right, so you can see that that's obviously specific to the mudari'. Right, and then the last one is lem. Right, lem is also specific to the mudari'. Right? Lam ya'rif. However, lam gives a past tense meaning. So lam ya'rif, he didn't know. It's the same thing as saying ma arafa. There is a small a rhetorical difference, one to use which will come with mostly with mumarasa, experience. So lam ya'rif, he didn't know. Lan ya'rifa, he will never know. La ya'rif, la ya'rifu, right? He does not know. Or ma ya'rifu, he does not know, but that's rare. And ma arafa, which is right, he didn't know. Tamam. Any questions on that? So the positive is the defaults. You don't need to add anything. There are some emphasizing words that you can put, like he definitely knew. So let's just quickly go through the slides regarding the present tense. It's the same thing, just repeated. Again, we're sticking to form 1 at the moment. So the present tense can also be active or passive, right? So the active would be ya'rifu or yaf'alu, as we mentioned on the board. Sorry, let's just write it on the board. Right, instead of fa'ala and fu'ila, which are past tense, we're going to have yaf'alu. Right? And yuf'alu. Now, to make any present tense word into a passive, you put a dhamma on the first letter, right? And the second to last letter always has a fatha, right? Regardless of the form. Right? Regardless of the form. Every form will have the same pattern. The first letter will be dhamma, the second to last letter will be a fatha. Right? So yuf'alu, it is being done. Right? Yu'rafu, it is known. Right now. Right? It is known or it will be known. Yujhalu, it is unknown. Yuthbatu, it is being established or made firm. How would I say it is being rejected? It is being rejected. Let's change this. How do I say it is being rejected? What was the word that we used for rejected earlier? It's a slightly different translation for what? Sorry? Kafara, right? So kufur means disbelief, right? That you can translate it as rejection. Generally, they would use this word for rejection, kadhiba, right? Kadhib means to lie, right? If you change it to form 2, it means to belie, right? To call someone else a liar, to reject. But for the sake of this, right? How do I say it is being disbelieved in, for instance? It is being disbelieved in. Yeah, using kufur. Using kufur. Yukfaru. Good. How do you say it is being known or it is known? Good. There's a verse in Surah Ar-Rahman where Allah says, "Yu'raful mujrimuna." And this is a beautiful example of combining verbs and variant words, derivative words. Because mujrimun is a type of passive participle of a form 4. Right? So mujrimun are the criminals. So how do I translate this? Right? The criminals, always translate the doer or the substitute doer first and then the verb. Right, so the criminals, what? Yu'raful mujrimuna.
Are known.
Good. The criminals are known, right? Bisimahum, right? By their signs. Right? They will be known by their signs. Okay. Right, so that's active and passive. All right, so passive, again, it shows us that the presence of an action without the mentioning of a doer. Right, the substitute doer can be used. Right, so yu'rafu Zaydun, Zayd is known. So, and then, right, and then the same applies to the positive and negative, right, which we already did. Right, so yaf'alu and yuf'alu are already positive because that's the default. Right. If I wanted to make them negative, I would have to add either la or len or lem, right, as above, or even ma. Ma does come as a negative for the present tense, but it's not that common. You can say ma ya'rif, right? Ma ya'rif rabbahu, right? He doesn't know his Lord, right? However, that's not very common, right? So you can use it as a negative, but you have to use the negative words as a prefix. Right, and then on top of that, you can have all the possible combinations. Right, so if I just write one word, just to fully close it out, let's say okay. There. Okay, now it's complete. Okay, so this word here, lan yuktaba, right, is it past or present? Madi or mudari'? Mudari', good. Right, so it's fi'al mudari', the better word here, I believe, right, I have some discrepancies with some English translations of terms, but they call this the imperfect tense. So if you don't want to say past and present and future, which is kind of confusing itself, you can just say imperfect as opposed to the past tense, which they call perfect. Okay, so it's mudari'. Is it ma'ruf or majhul? Is it ma'ruf or majhul? Sorry? Majhul. Okay, what leads you to believe that it's majhul? What is there that proves that to you?
Because the first letter has a dhamma.
The first letter has a dhamma. Perfect. Right, so you can see here that there's a clear difference between the two types of words. So there's always a way to distinguish. There's always a way to distinguish, and that's generally how Arabic is. No two words are alike with very few exceptions. Okay, so it's mudari', majhul, right? Is it positive or negative?
Negative.
Right. Okay, so it's all together. Let's say it all together, right? It's a al-fi'al. It's a verb. Al-fi'al, al-mudari', al-majhul, al-manfi. Right, so al-mudari' majhul manfi. Right. So lan yuktaba, final thing left. How do you translate it? So you know what the root letters mean, okay? Because you already told me about kitab being a book, right? Book being something that's written, right? So lan meaning never, lan yuktaba, passive translation, but it is a verb, so you need a tense, right? And the tense is going to be future, because never can only be used in the future.
It will never be written.
It will never be written, exactly. Right, so it will never be written. Right, who is not going to write it? Not mentioned. Right, unknown. Right, so on the unknowns, you're going to have a lot of translations like it, or the thing that. Right, and they're tough to translate in English. They really are. Right, it will never be written. If I wanted to, I could say, for instance, a book like the Qur'an. Right, لن يكتب كتاب كمثل القرآن. Right, a book like the Qur'an can never be written. Like, so that's where you would use a passive sentence, right, with never, for instance. Any questions from up to here? before we close? For those of you who have the slides, you can easily zoom in into the slide, and you have the whole charts there. Right, so obviously we're just using the first. We're always using he. He did, right, with no motive in that at all, except for that. That's the basic pattern. You can change the pattern to whatever pronoun you wish according to the scale. Right, so يفعل يفعلان يفعلون تفعل تفعلان يفعلن تفعل تفعلين تفعلون تفعلين تفعلان تفعلن أفعل نفعل. Right, so those are all the scales. Right? He did, she did, you man did, one woman did, I did, and we did, or are doing. Any questions or anything that's not clear?
So is Laysa a particle of negativity, or is it something different?
Laysa is not a particle, right? So these are particles, right? These are huruf, which are used as prefixes. Laysa is actually a verb in and of itself. So laysa is a tricky word. It's a verb, like it's a deficient verb, like kana. Right? So if you wanted to use laysa with a verb, you could do that. Right? You can say laysa yaktubu, right? Which is very rare. You would normally use laysa with nouns. Right? So after laysa, generally a noun would come. You would never have a verb directly after laysa. So you would say laysa zaydun yaktubu. Right? Zayd doesn't write. So it could be used, but it by itself is not a negating harf. It's not hurufun manfiya. Or hurufun nafiya, you can say. Any other questions? We're going to send, right now, we're going to send anyone who's not registered, please go ahead and do so. We're going to send a full chart which has all 10 forms, past, present, passive, active. The negative, affirmative are not there, so you can easily just add a prefix. And there's also examples for every single form. Right, so we're going to add that. I believe one of you or two of you have it already, but we're going to send it inshallah ta'ala. As we mentioned in the first class, the theory, that's mostly my responsibility, but the practice is its own. I can't do much except for encourage you to memorize the charts and just practice them daily. Right? So far we're only in Form 1, and we're going to be in Form 1 for another class after this. Right? So take this time to memorize the past tense and the present tense of Form 1 at least. Right? And you can just stick to fa'ala. You don't have to use all the other words. You can just use the root fa'ala. So past tense, right? Fa'ada, fa'ada, fa'adu, fa'alat, fa'alata, fa'anna, fa'alta, fa'atuma, fa'altum, all the way to end. And then present tense, yaf'alu, yaf'alani. If you wish and you're feeling extra himma and aspiration, you can do the passives as well. Right? Making the first letter al-dhamma, second to last a fatha for the mudari', right? And making the first letter al-dhamma, second to last a kasra for the past tense, the madi. وصلى الله تعالى على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. شكرا جزيلا. أنت مشكور.